So check it out, guys. Is this thing the ultimate overland van? It is four-wheel drive. It has a low-range transfer case. It has front and rear diff locks out of a G-Wagon. It's a mechanical turbo diesel. It's a 5-speed manual. What other checkbox? Oh, the payload is enormous. This thing is utterly incredible, but it is not my new Overland vehicle. And if you want to find out why, I'm going to go into all the details right now about what I think of vans for overlanding and why for this particular journey, I did not get one, although I'm a little bit jealous of this one. Here we go. This is The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan. Let's go vans for overlanding. So this thing is a pretty incredible vehicle. You just heard me run through all the stats, and actually it's owned by my friends, Jordan and Candace. Their Instagram handle is BeOldLater. You should check them out. I'll throw a link down in the description. So these guys, they drove a four-wheel drive Mitsubishi Delica van from Alaska to Argentina, the entire Pan American Highway. They had an incredible adventure. And now they're saving money, they're planning for their next adventure, and they just had a little baby boy. Congratulations, Hank is here. And so they need a bit more space than the Delica can provide. That's why they bought this thing. So this is incredible, and I'm a little bit green with envy seeing it and wondering if maybe I should have got a van. Yeah, let's run through the reasons, and towards the end you'll see why I'm not getting a van. But as I said, the specs on this thing is incredible. This was actually a German ambulance or a German fire truck, and it was imported to Canada a few years ago. It's a year 2000 model, so it's legal in Canada, and in a couple more years it'll be legal in the US. But this is one of those vans that was converted by Allrad or Egelhout, however you pronounce that, which is like the four-wheel drive arm. Kind of, I guess, they've become synonymous with Mercedes and Sprinter vans. And although this looks like it, it's not actually a Mercedes Sprinter van. It has a VW badge on the front, it has a VW engine, but somewhere along the line it's about 2/3 Mercedes. This is one of the really early ones where they were in partnership, and it wasn't until later years that Mercedes really took it over and started making these from scratch. But I'm getting a bit sidetracked because I'm so excited about this vehicle. It's got like a 3,000-pound payload. As I said, mechanical turbo diesel, it can run on kerosene. There's no computer controlling the engine. So all of that is incredible, and those are all the reasons that you would get a van like this. Obviously, the interior living space is enormous. But why am I not getting a van? That's what I'm here to talk about today. And a few of you guys in the comments on my last video, you started talking about one of the main things you look for in an overland vehicle, and that is it has to put a smile on your face when you're driving it. It has to be fun to drive. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I'm not getting a van. Although this thing is cool and I like it, it's not very appropriate for the places that I want to go in the world. And when I think about, I'm rolling down the road, I've got the window down, the sun's shining. This is cool, I like it. It's not really my style. It doesn't get me excited. I'm not going to get up in the middle of the night and start sketching it and say wow, this thing looks amazing. Let's get it on the cover of a magazine, let's promote it. It just doesn't get me excited in that way. So that's kind of reason number one that I'm not getting a van. And reason number two that I'm not getting a van this time around is the off-road or the four-wheel drive capability. And this is a tough one for me because I'm not a big four-wheel driver. I've never put 40-inch tires on my Jeep. I'm not trying to run the hardest trails in Moab. That's not who I am. That's not what I do for fun. And when I think back over my trips, a van like this, it actually would have been phenomenal for the Pan American Highway. There's no doubt about it. For Africa, I definitely pushed hard in the Jeep, and there were days in the Congo, there was lots of sand days where, the Jeep, it made it through, but not with a whole lot of margin to spare. Would I have driven a van like this through those same places? I don't think I would. And so when I think about it, I think about how it's going to transform your trip. And what it actually turns out to be, when you're on a really long trip, the Pan American Highway, let's say, 90% of the time, a vehicle like this is absolutely ideal. And then the last 10% is, I think of it as the 10% that is the highlight, that is the reason you drove all the way there. So you're down in Bolivia, you're exploring, Bolivia is incredible. And then the time comes, you're going to drive across the salt flats and the whole Lagunas route. And actually Jordan, the owner of the van, he was just telling me, friends of his, they only had a two-wheel drive van. And after sort of half a day in that region, they gave up because they got it stuck too many times. And so they turned around and they left. So that means they drove all the way to Bolivia and they kind of missed out on maybe the best part, maybe the biggest adventure. And that to me is where I really struggle. And when I think back on my trips, when I think back on the amazing places I got to and the things I've seen, 90% of it, 95% of it, totally you can get there in a two-wheel drive van. But then there's that last few kilometers, the last few hours of driving. Maybe you go up into the mountains to a glacier that, like, the road is almost not a road, it's just a donkey cart. Or, you know, maybe you drive through some really deep sand to get to that remote campsite at the end of the beach in Australia that only the dedicated four-wheel drives are getting to. You know, there's a million examples where you make that decision to say, I'm gonna go that last bit of driving to really get the icing on the cake, to really make the trip those insane memories that you'll never forget. And Australia, you know, if I didn't have the four-wheel drive I had, there's no way I would have driven the Canning stock route. There's no way I would have crossed the Simpson Desert. There's no way I would have driven the old Telly track and a whole bunch of the beaches that I drove on. They were all the best parts. That's why I went there. Without those, to be honest, I don't even want to go to Australia. It doesn't even interest me that much to just sort of drive on pavement and, you know, go to the main touristy spots. So for me, my worry is that if I drive a van like this, the trip is going to be impacted. It's going to be reduced. And you're not just reducing sort of the whole trip, you're really just taking the icing off the cake. In my opinion, you're taking off the absolute best parts of the trip and then they're gone and then you never get to have them. So for me, I'm not ready yet to give up my four-wheel drive capability. I want to have a dedicated, strong four-wheel drive that hopefully can go anywhere on the planet, as well as all my other criteria, my interior living space, my good fuel mileage, and good payload. They're the three that I'm aiming for. So for me, not a van this time around. All of that being said though, there is one van that I think does meet all of my criteria, and I did seriously consider, and that is the Sportsmobile conversion. So this is a Ford E350. Usually the years you're looking for are about 1998 to about 2002, I forget, maybe 2003. They came with the 7.3 litre Power Stroke diesel, ginormous engine. These things are solid axle, body on frame, and they can be built impressively. And the reason I know how impressive they are is because quite a bit of West Africa, I convoyed with a German couple who had one. So I saw it every single day. I saw how capable it was. They drove all the same tracks and roads that I did. We did the Congo together, the crazy mud, Gabon, you know, Cameroon, Angola, Namibia in the deep sand. All of that, their Sportsmobile van kept up with my Jeep without a problem. It did have 37-inch tires. It does have a monster diesel engine, but it is a very, very capable vehicle. And when we compared them side by side, I really just sat there with my jaw open and I said, they still have the same 4 tires on the ground that I do. They still have about the same maintenance burden that I do. They're burning about the same amount of fuel as I was. They were getting maybe 16 to 17 miles a gallon, but they have like 5, 7, 8 times the amount of interior living space. All 3 of us could sit inside that thing to eat lunch and we'd be like meters apart from each other. They were like down the far end of the van. I nearly needed to send them a text message to talk to them. It was insane, the interior volume. So incredible four-wheel drive, not a problem there. Pretty decent gas mileage, monstrous payload, monstrous interior living space. That's a vehicle I'm interested in. All right, so I started really getting into it. Do I want to get a Sportsmobile? As I said, you have to get one that's around the year 2000. So right off the bat, you're buying a vehicle that's nearly 25 years old. That's something to think about. And of course, given that it's such a good vehicle, they are not cheap. Low end is 30,000 US. They'll go up to 60, 70,000 US if you want to get one that doesn't have high mileage and isn't a rust bucket. I'd prefer not to buy a rust bucket. Let's hypothetically say I find a good one for 50,000. I'm 50,000 US dollars into a 23, a 25-year-old vehicle. That's a lot of money, and a vehicle that old, it's going to need some work. My friends, you know, they needed to replace the canvas on theirs. They wanted to change the whole pop-up mechanism. So my friends actually cracked the frame on their Sportsmobile because of the way the four-wheel drive conversion was done. Where it was welded onto the original frame was a bit of a weak point. And West Africa roads being what they are, they did actually crack the frame on such an enormous vehicle. So anyway, 25-year-old vehicle, you're gonna be spending some time and money to bring it up to speed. That is a lot of money invested in an older vehicle, and I'm just not excited about that. It's not where I want to invest my time and money and energy to then have a project that you're kind of always fixing up the little problems. So all of that is to say, Sportsmobile would be the number one for me. This might be number two. And then after that, vans don't really excite me that much. Maybe one day when I'm old and I'll be happy traveling on pavement, I'll get a van. But for now, I'm not going to get a van. So if you do want to see what I've got, if you want to see progress photos, the build is very much underway. Those photos are over on Patreon right now. You can sign up, you can see all the behind the scenes details, all the whys, all the whats, as well as how the build is coming along. We're running out of time. The plan is to get it to Overland Expo West. That is April 19 to 21, sorry, May 19 to 21. So with any luck, we're gonna be there with the new vehicle. But if you wanna get the behind the scenes scoop, all of that's over on Patreon right now. Go and check it out. But until next time, we'll talk about a whole new type of vehicle that I seriously considered for overlanding. But until then, have fun out there, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.